Welcome to a new episode of TechTrends. It's been a minute since we've done one of these. Ryan, I'm looking forward to doing this with you today, and also welcome Jacob to the panel.
Thanks, Julian. It's great to be here, and looking forward to the critical updates we're going to provide.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here, and really excited to dive into the topics today.
Good to have you here. And speaking of the topics, today we're talking about the 2025 National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, and its impact on DoD cybersecurity strategies. So the NDAA includes a lot of mandates that cover modernizing cloud security, implementing AI governance, strengthening mobile security, advancing zero trust architecture within DoD. Why don't I pass it over to you guys? And Ryan Heath, CTO of C1 Gov, and Jacob Bikshorn, client executive, specializing in cybersecurity. Ryan, do you want to say a few words as we open the discussion on this?
Sure. So, to kind of get started with this, a lot of the DoD agencies that we deal with, they have multiple clouds across their environment, including some public, some private, some hybrid clouds, very big on the FedRAMP side. Each one of these clouds basically has their own security policies, risk models, access controls. This really kind of creates a visibility gap and operationally efficiencies in the mix. So the NDAA recognizes that kind of a fragmented cloud security approach, is a national security risk at this point. And, that's why we must kind of implement a centralized security strategy that works across multiple vendors across all the infrastructures and all the cloud environments that we support.
Jacob, I know that, as a specialist in cybersecurity, you're going to have a lot to say about many of the subtopics here.
My initial take is it's very encouraging to see this be a priority from the NDAA. I think it's always important to take a step back and understand why a multi-cloud strategy makes the most sense for the federal government and really for any enterprise that is developing applications and managing large data sets. There are pros and cons to hosting information in AWS, Azure, Google, or in a self-hosted hybrid environment. And it's foolish to really limit yourself to any one solution. But as Ryan mentioned, when you are taking on lots of different tools, you can get yourself into trouble having to individually secure each and every one of those tools. And as a security team, it's highly unlikely that you're going to have somebody who is really well versed in AWS security modules, Microsoft security modules, adopting an umbrella policy that is going to set strong governance standards and reduce a lot of the complexity and knowledge overhead is really critical mission for the federal government, for the Department of Defense agencies, and excited to see that this is a high priority for them to take on this year.
Jacob, do you think that this 180-day compliance mandate is feasible, and what's the impetus behind that directive?
I definitely think that it's feasible. Do I think that it's possible to be fully up and running and have full integration from your DevOps team out to your SOC in 180 days? That is probably a stretch. But from a visibility, governance, and compliance standpoint, having a unified viewpoint of all of the data running across your different clouds, this is definitely an achievable tool. And if you're leveraging the right partnerships, this is something that can be accomplished in a relatively short time frame. And then once you have that firm visibility kind of taken into account, then you can start to begin to prioritize where we want to go from there. Whether that be working into the different sub services within cloud platforms, making sure that things that are being built within those are being done correctly. Whether that be we want to make sure that our SOC analysts and the folks in operations know how to translate data from this visibility into real action. There's a lot of different directions you can go. And those are things that will take time. And again, leaning on the right partners can be certainly accomplished within a year.
Okay. And, Ryan, we have the Zero Trust Center of Excellence on C1Gov.com, Converge One Government Solutions website. I think it goes without saying that, these updates are going to affect the way that you advise clients, and does it affect your service, the C1 Gov service offering, in terms of an expansion of services, or is it really more of a change to the services you're already offering?
It's not really a change to the services, maybe more of a focus on the services we're offering. I think with the multi-cloud strategy and the approach and the framework they've kind of set forth, and all the DoD docs that have come out, regarding strategy, over the last year or two, that really kind of helps frame what we're trying to do and help solve the customers' issues.
Obviously AI is is certainly a hot topic right now, and not surprised to see that included in here. The NSA AI Security Center proposal. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Ryan? What can you give us a little bit of background on the purpose and the reason for this?
Yeah, so the use of the adversarial AI and kind of cyber warfare is growing pretty rapidly. Attackers are leaving AI-powered phishing, data poisoning attacks, deepfake-driven misinformation campaigns to really target our DoD systems. The NSA AI Security Center is tasked with identifying those attacks, providing the governance frameworks for those agencies, ensuring AI-powered DoD decision-making systems are kind of resilient across without the manipulation that can go on within those systems. So they have a pretty big job, kind of really putting that framework together.
I can imagine that this poses. We've talked in the past. We've met with Bill DeDefour and Alan Orr from NICE and talked about AI knowledge management and multiple knowledge systems and how those things are integrated. I'm assuming Jacob, there's going to be a lot of contingencies here in terms of overlap between AI and cloud security and having multiple cloud platforms, but then also various knowledge sets, data sets that are going to be used for sourcing AI information. Sounds pretty complicated.
It certainly sounds complicated, and the ramifications of doing this poorly are massive, especially within the context of the DoD, but really any type of large government agency that's interfacing with citizens on a day-to-day basis. When we really think about what is the purpose of adversarial AI from an attacker's viewpoint, it's to manipulate data to almost fool an AI system or an AI model into providing incorrect information to a user that is trying to use it for its proper uses. So whether that be tricking it around a certain type of image or some type of information that if I'm in the field, part of a military operation, and I'm trying to utilize an AI system, I want to be sure that the information being intaken and that I'm receiving back from that input is accurate and has not been tampered with. And so while that is obviously a very daunting thing to consider, I think when we think about what is the way to defend against these types of attacks, it becomes a little less complicated, because really what we're really have to be focused on is managing the data that is being used to feed these models and ensuring that we have really good policies around governance and in the availability and the reliability of that data. And so whether that means making sure that who has access to that data is strongly policed. The other piece of that AI puzzle is not necessarily the database, but the program, the AI application that a user is interfacing with, making sure that there are strong, secure design principles that are being incorporated into that, so that somebody who is trying to do some type of injection poisoning or do something that's going to get the model to trip up in some way or another. There are ways in application development that you can prevent those types of attacks from being successful. And so by not being so concerned about what's happening on the outside, but instead focusing on what's going on, what are the things that I can control as somebody who's putting together an AI platform. And those things I think are data governance and having found security controls in the development aspect. By taking strong ownership of those two areas, I think that there's a lot that we can do to defend against these types of AI attacks.
So, I'll leave this to either one of you, but do you want to get into a little detail about C1 Gov's role in securing AI-driven decision-making systems? We talked about the need for it, but how does C1 Gov service that need?
Where C1 Gov can play an important role in these types of conversations is around our offering in an AI enablement and readiness assessment, something that we have recently began offering, and it is in partnership with some folks that have a lot of experience doing data exchange services and being able to analyze all different types of data that's being stored across all different file types and location types within an organization. That offering from us is going to be a really critical first step for organizations as they begin to piece together their own AI applications, because having a really strong handle on that data, where it is, what the types are, that's going to be mission critical before any type of AI application is ready for market. Because if there is data that's unaccounted for, it is inherently vulnerable, and it's something that somebody's going to try to exploit and exfiltrate. So working with C1 government and utilizing our solution to get that really strong bear hug around what your data assets look like is a critical first step as we go down this AI journey.
Recently we've talked a lot about private 5G and the need for having secure networks and military installations and similar facilities where you kind of have like this closed ecosystem and a need for very tight security around the data that people are exchanging, including communications, speaking to each other on mobile phones. So what are the implications for mobile security in NDAA 2025?
Well, let me bring a real life example for you. I was right onto a project, where we couldn't bring our cell phones in. First day, we're supposed to just lock them up, go through the read on. It was about an 8-hour process. And they showed from their last read on, one of the individuals that was there, he lost his phone before, etc. So they basically, took his number, took the SIM card, and they showed us, here's his locations. Tell me what agency he belongs to. And you can see exactly where he was going over the last 2 weeks, which offices he was going to. You can tell exactly what agency he was belonged to. Just seeing that real time and how fast they were able to pull that up. If one of our adversaries picks that information up, they'll be able to pinpoint and target an individual for information. So within the new NDAA, mandate, the dynamic selector rotation for DoD issued mobile devices, I think, is a great idea. And what the technology does is it prevents adversaries from tracking the DoD personnel by enabling an exchange of their identifiers. So that one person every week, it might flip. So they won't really be able to see exactly where that person's been doing, longer than a few days to a week. So I think that's a very important piece for, classified individuals that, can be very targeted.
And Jacob, you and I had a conversation recently about, a lot of the, cybersecurity aspects of the NDAA. And one of the things that we talked about was permission-based access, wasn't it? Is that you want to talk about that a little bit in this context?
Yeah, I think that what the NDAA is getting at in this this dynamic selector rotation program is very pertinent for folks in these classified roles. I think that there's also something strongly to be considered for people in civilian roles that don't have that level of classification, that maybe don't require that dynamic selector rotation type of technology on their mobile device. But I think of myself. Maybe I'm looking at cat videos on Instagram. I click a link. Who amongst us has not fallen prey to a link? And it's so easy for somebody to execute a SIM swap attack and gain access into some of your credentials via that type of methodology. What's really critical for organizations to do to defend against what really is inevitable, unless you are going to take the dramatic step of bringing this dynamic selector rotation technology to the entire federal government, is to have a really buttoned up identity and permission policy, so that in the event that that it's really around the corner for any organization that someone's identity and credentials are going to be stolen, that the amount of damage somebody can do with those credentials is limited. Making sure that somebody doesn't have access into an HR system with private information that that's really not anything to do with their job function on a day-to-day basis. Having a really strong permission and access management policy. These are things that an organization can do to prevent against different attacks that are pointed at a mobile device.
Hey, you just mentioned access management policy, so it sounds like we're talking about a lot more than just basic authentication, right?
Right. It's one thing to authenticate through a system, and that's something that can be tricked. With the type of attack that I described. It's another to have the permissions that are set up once you're inside of that application, and that's something that can be controlled from an organizational standpoint, and making sure that somebody does not have improper elevated permissions, or that there are policies in place that if suddenly there is permission escalation from a user that typically does not do that sort of work, you need to have the type of alerting and visibility into that type of anomalous behavior, so that when someone's credentials inevitably do become compromised, again, the damage will be limited, and you will be able to catch that incident early on before much information can be lost.
So Ryan, how do these heightened measures, and particularly access management, affect usability, for example, in Zero Trust for DoD personnel?
It basically, you're going to either put MFA together, you're going to put your CAT card, typically, some type of second form of authentication into the mix. So it's not just a password. You have to, physically be part of that. So, that's why, having your SIM card stolen is an issue, because you can get those MFAs back to the SIM card. Having a CAT card with a separate PIN, that helps as well. So kind of putting all of those together, there should be multiple steps of authentication.
Yeah, so it sounds like from a usability perspective, it's a little bit more complicated, but the trade-off is it's a necessity if we want to, ensure the greatest level of security, right?
Correct.
We talk a lot about C1 Gov's portfolio of solutions, including more and more AI-driven solutions. Does that come into play here as well? I mean, we talk about using AI for data management and analysis, for example. I would imagine that's probably a great opportunity here, right?
Yeah, especially when you're talking about access control and basically figuring out where the user should be. Once he kind of goes outside that boundary, be able to track everything and then pop those flags and then verify why that individual is in there to kind of stop that attack or mitigate it. So having those controls in there is very important.
One of the proposals of the NDAA 2025 is the establishment of a dedicated cyber force. Jacob, can you talk a little bit about that?
Again, a very encouraging sign from the NDAA that cyber is being taken very, very seriously. We have a space force, and it makes sense. And as the threat landscapes change, it's imperative on the Department of Defense to stay, a step ahead of the curve. When we think about cyber warfare, I think you think ransomware, you think, different attacks that are targeting private industry. But the reality is that our electrical grids are, a target. Our energy systems, the things that everyday Americans are utilizing on a day-to-day basis, are all connected to the internet, and all require I think government attention in making sure that they are safe from adversary. And so having a centralized cyber force that is really dedicating a lot of the might of the federal government and the Department of Defense around protecting these critical infrastructure assets makes perfect sense to me. And I'm excited to see how the cyber force develops in the years to come.
So, Ryan, C1 Gov specializes in creating custom solutions that comprise, various products and services from your partner organizations. And so you guys are very familiar with, integrating systems right? For example, I can imagine that adding a cyber force is probably going to bring a lot of challenges when it comes to integration, right? Because where's the ownership versus oversight in terms of, if all of the branches already have cyber division. Is there any indication as to how that's going to be handled in terms of now having one group that oversees, that for all the branches?
Well, I'm hoping it's going to be a really good overlay for the cyber forces that are kind of already in place, looking at their individual, if it's bases, commands, what they're responsible for, but also providing framework, escalation, and just kind of support. Because as any military, if it's Air Force, Army, you're only in that position for a few years before you're kind of moved on to something else or promoted out to do something different. So just the cycle of individuals kind of coming out, there always needs to be that kind of that top layer to kind of overlook and provide the guidance that's needed. This is, I think, a really great thing just on the recruitment and retention standpoint for, any one of our DoD branches to get guys in that can easily be kind of spun up and have that oversight instead of just kind of, learning from a book and going, hitting the buttons and looking at the screen all day of hopefully something, pops up and they can alert somebody. So it really should kind of give a really good career path and trajectory, inside of the military branch. And then once they're done with the military, on the outside. So I think it's a really good career choice at this point.
So we've covered a lot. I mean, I think we've covered most of maybe a couple of things that we'll save for another episode. But as far as DoD cybersecurity implications are concerned, we've certainly, I think, covered the key points. Jacob, what are your takeaways? From this? I know that you're, encouraged by the heightened focus on cybersecurity.
For me, I think that the big takeaways for the DoD and for any government agency is to figure out what is the foundation of how we're going to approach this. And so when we think about multi-cloud security, when we think about data and AI security, the number one thing you need to start with is visibility. Where do I have assets? Where am I utilizing compute? And do I have the utmost confidence that there isn't something out there that I'm blind to, that a program that I forgot to decommission, an account that is lying dormant, a developer that that is no longer affiliated with the department. When you have a really, really strong foundation of visibility, it allows you to put action plans in place and begin to get more granular with how you're going to improve your performance, improve your efficiency, and drive better security outcomes. But without that visibility component and having not just visibility into individual tools, but an umbrella, a single pane of glass for you to be able to assess and understand where all of your different assets are and where potential vulnerabilities lie. Before you have that in place, it's very, very difficult to tackle any of the other topics that we've talked about today. And so I think that where we with C1 can be a really pivotal resource is in working with our clients around putting that strategy together, ensuring that they have full confidence that they know where their data assets are being stored and who has access to them, and what potential risks exist within their current infrastructure. And from there are so many different things that we can do to work together and drive better outcomes for everybody.
Brian, I would, I guess, extend that question and ask, what are your recommendations? We're talking about putting out a compliance guide on the website in the Zero Trust section, and also an infographic that'll be helpful just to give a cursory overview. What's your advice to organizations that are facing the challenge of compliance and adhering to these mandates?
The biggest thing is really not to look just at kind of your little scope and, hey, I'm good with a zero trust on whatever I'm responsible for. It's, you got to take that all the way out to the end user or the warfighter, making sure that interoperability is there. That you're not closing things down that in a warfight that are going to cause big issues. So really walking through customers through that and making sure that they're not just singularly focused on one thing so that they meet a requirement, but it actually goes all the way through to the warfighter.
I love that point because the tools that the warfighter in the field are utilizing, they begin within a development lab. It's not enough to just be compliant. It's important that we are arming the folks that are building tools with the necessary information so that they are doing things safely and efficiently, and are able to do their mission critical work without compliance being overly burdensome in their day-to-day operations.
I think we've covered, a lot of the major points that, that we wanted to for the NDAA 2025 today. We'll come back in another episode and talk about a few other subtopics. One of the things that we often talk about, regardless of the topic we're covering, is C1 Gov's ability to assist their customers, existing and new alike, with compliance and transformation. Ryan, do you want to just say a couple words about that as we close up here?
It's really just kind of going through the process, really understanding what you currently have, how it's supposed to work, what kind of applications and security, zero trust kind of appliances we can put around that to fit the guidelines that you need to and move forward.
Thanks to you both for your time today. Jacob, welcome to the team again, and looking forward to having more of these conversations with both of you. Appreciate your time. And everyone, like, share, subscribe. Make sure to send this out to your IT colleagues and friends, and we'll be back with another episode very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.